The Canadian Armed Forces have a storied past on the battlefield. They also have a distinguished present, including having incredible aim. Really incredible, as in 3 of the last 4 snipers to hold the record for longest confirmed kill shot were Canadians. And the most recent record was set just this past June for a shot that traveled a remarkable 3,450 meters. Joining us now for more on that record and on Canada's long-standing expertise in sniping, we welcome, in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Warrant Officer Morgan Warren, Sniper Cell Instructor, B Company, Infantry School, Canadian Forces Base Gagetown. And here in our studio, Dr. James McKillop, historian, Directorate of History and Heritage at the Department of National Defense in our nation's capital. And I'm delighted to welcome both of you to TVO tonight on this day before Remembrance Day. Thank you both for joining us. I want to start by reading this to set up our discussion, and then we'll go from there. Back in 2002, then Corporal Rob Furlong took down a Taliban fighter in Afghanistan from a distance of 2,430 meters. It was the longest kill shot in military history at the time, and broke a record set just days prior by teammate and comrade Master Corporal Aaron Perry. Corporal Furlong's record was broken by British sniper Craig Harrison in 2009, but Canadian bragging rights were restored in June 2017 when a member of the JTF-2, the Joint Task Force 2 Special Forces Unit, shot an Islamic State fighter in Mosul, Iraq, from a distance of 3,450 meters. Warren, first question to you. Do we know the name of the guy who made this new record?
No, we don't know the name of the individual that made that shot, and chances are we won't for a long time due to operational security reasons.
Tell me more about that. What would the security reasons be?
Operational security is to protect the members of the Canadian Armed Forces. You don't ever want to let anybody know too much about what's going on.
Well, the only reason I ask is, you know, the guy who took the kill shot on bin Laden has now written a book and he's been all over TV, and you don't see that happening up here. Is that right?
Well, I'm not aware of the individual that made the shot on bin Laden and whether he is still currently serving or has since released from the military. I'm sure once the member in question releases from the military, I'm sure that name will come out, and whether or not that individual writes a book, I mean, only time will tell.
Gotcha. How long does it actually take a sniper's bullet to travel 3,450 meters?
We're looking around in the vicinity of 10 seconds time of flight.
That's amazing. What is the longest shot that you have ever successfully made?
Longest shot I've ever successfully made in training was 2,375 meters.
So this is another 50% beyond that. How do you even calculate your aim in order to hit a target that is so far away?
To hit targets far away like that, we use ballistic computers and ballistic software to help us make those corrections. With that software, we put in all of our knowns, everything that we know. So about our rifle, so our barrel length, our twist rate, as well as other things like our bullet weight, bullet lengths, and caliber, along with some other things, which they're all factored into the calculation, and they'll give us a firing solution, which we then apply to our scopes, and then you're back to your basic marksmanship principles.
I mean, I presume you got to take things like wind and rain and that into account as well?
Absolutely. A wind call, there are devices to help you make a wind call, as well as old wind charts to help you make a wind call. But I mean, from where the shooter is to where the target is, I mean, whether you're 50 meters away or you're 3 kilometers away, the wind direction could change. Well, it will change multiple times. You're never going to get a constant wind from the firer's position to the target all the time. So a lot of it comes down to training and experience. A lot of guys will tell you that their wind calls that they are making, despite the fact that they do use wind charts and calculators, a lot of it is coming straight out of their gut.
And Warren, I don't want to take anything away from the guy who took the shot, but I do have to ask, how lucky do you think he was as well?
I don't think he was lucky at all. Me personally, I don't believe in luck. The way I see it, there's trained and there's untrained. I think that shot right there is a testament to the Canadian sniper program, and moreover to the JTF-2 and their sniper program in particular.
Well, that takes us to James McKillop here. James, when did Canada first become known for producing world-class snipers?
Well, the origins of sniping in the Canadian context really date from the First World War. Now, there are antecedents to all of this. Really, in the Western world, if you like, it kind of started with the Franco-Prussian War. And in the aftermath of the Prussian victory over the French, there was a French reaction, and it manifested itself in the form of what became known as francs-tireurs, so basically French civilians taking up arms against the Prussians. Prussians didn't like it. They found it very difficult to cope with, and they had a very strong reaction. There was lots of executions of hostages and that sort of thing. But they also learned from it. So between the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871 and the beginning of the First World War in 1914, the Germans, now the Germans, embraced this whole idea of sniping. And so when they went to war in 1914, they were ready. They had dedicated sniper rifles equipped with telescopic sights. The British Armed Forces were completely unprepared for this. There were zero. The only, what we would think of as a sniper rifle, the only type of equipment like that that was fielded with the British and the Canadian Army in 1914, 1915, really were sporting arms. So these were enthusiasts, mostly officers in the British Army.
So when did we get serious about this then? If we had an understanding of it 100 years ago, we certainly weren't world class at that point.
Well, in 1915 already, what had happened on the Western Front is that the front had stabilized. This happened at the end of 1914. And that kind of set the conditions for this type of warfare. Fixed locations, people that were dug in. And over the course of 1915, people started to react. And the British started to react. They eventually started a program of training. Now, they were slow to do this. I mean, by any standard, it was slow. It wasn't until the end of 1915 that they established a school, and it wasn't until early 1916 that they actually had students going through it. But the founders of this sniping program canvassed the various organizations that were available, including the Canadian, first the Canadian Division, and then the Corps by the end of 1915, and they found that there was unusual aptitude. So from the beginning, Canadians were being recognized as being innovative, maybe a little bit freer thinking. No one has ever actually studied this. There's no straight answer to why Canadians kind of came to the fore and came to the fore quickly, but they did. Well,
let me do a follow-up on this, because Joseph Boyden's debut novel was called 3-Day Road, and it was centered around an Indigenous Canadian sniper in World War I, and the character apparently was inspired, at least in part, by a man named Corporal Francis Pegamegabo, who is credited with 378 kills during his 4 years of sniper service in Europe. Why would there have been such a strong Indigenous presence in our sniper corps that long ago?
Well, again, it's not possible to give you a straight answer to that question. As you know, we generally get the question about, at this time of year, how many people of Indigenous origin served in the military? We don't even know that. And the upside of this is that we were kind of colorblind in the First World War. That's a nice thing. The downside is it's very hard to track these people. But there was a significant Indigenous participation in the Army in particular, in the First World War. And not just Indigenous people, but about half the population of Canada at the time was what we think of as kind of rural. And it's certainly a fact that many of the people who enrolled in the Army had outdoors experience, hunting, shooting, and that's kind of where we get this special nexus that is sniping. In the world of shooting, if you like, there's kind of two groups. There's shooters, those are the guys who are really good with the firearms, and there are hunters. Those are the guys who are good at stealth and camouflage. And you put the two of them together, and that's where you get a sniper. And again, the origins of it in the Canadian context are a little bit vague, but certainly conditions in Canada probably predisposed a lot of rural Canadians to this kind of lifestyle and the consequent skills, and certainly Indigenous populations as well.
Let me go back to Warren then. What would you say would the differences be in the skills needed to be a good hunter versus a good sniper?
I think Dr. McKillop definitely hit the nail on the head right there with what he thinks a sniper is, an individual who's a marksman, and then an individual that can actually conceal themselves and stalk an enemy. So I mean, to be a sniper, that's those are your two major things. I mean, trying to make those shots, trying to make those win calls, as well as having the ability to camouflage and conceal yourself to actually get close enough to the enemy undetected. So those are definitely the two most important things.
Warren, how good are you?
I mean, I'm a product of the Canadian Sniper program. I'm no better, no worse than any other sniper. We all are put in different situations, and if you're put in a situation, you will perform. Just like the most recent shot, I'm sure if there had been another member of that team, could have made that same shot.
The good warrant officer is being modest. For him to be in the position that he's in now, it means he's a crackerjack.
A crackerjack, you want to define that for the rest of us?
He's good at what he does, I'm sure.
Okay, let's, Dr. McKillop, follow up on this. Hollywood is all over this story, of course. The Hurt Locker was the best picture of the year at the Academy Awards some years ago. American Sniper was a popular movie, of course, as well. How accurate, in your view, is the Hollywood portrayal of the sniper?
In some respects, they get it. In some respects, it's very dramatized to the point of fiction.
So what is fictitious about what we often see?
Well, if I think Hurt Locker is certainly a movie that I've seen, and there's a scene in it where there's sniper, counter-sniper moment, and the drama that they're trying to portray is, of course, the patience and the precision, and that's fine. That's all true, but they do it within the context of a set of circumstances which are ridiculous. So there's an American sniper who's armed with a 50 caliber sniper rifle, very powerful long-range weapon, fighting against a terrorist or a Taliban, I can't remember exactly what he is in the movie, but anyway, a bad guy who's equipped with a Russian sniper rifle, which is a much less powerful weapon. And in the movie, the Russian or the enemy guy is hiding in a concrete block building, and the American guy is in a trench. And they sit there and they wait and wait and wait, and they're building up the drama, and the sweat's pouring down, and the fly is landing on his eyeball. But the reality is the weapon that the American guy was using, he could easily have fired right through the cinder block wall and killed the guy.
So that's something you would know, but the average viewer wouldn't know.
No, of course. And also in the context of that combat at the time, if they knew that there was a guy hiding in a building, they probably would have whistled up an airstrike and dropped a 500-pounder on them.
Gotcha.
But the notion of this, patience and field craft and endurance. One thing that people maybe don't appreciate is how hard it is, how physically demanding it is to approach a target without being seen. This takes tremendous skill, but also takes tremendous strength and endurance and willpower to do it without being detected.
Well, let me follow up with Warren on that. The psychological component that you would see in a movie, also the way that Dr. McKillop just described it. Can you talk about that, Warren?
The psychological aspect, I mean, to use, I guess, American Sniper as an example, the way Hollywood portrayed the very beginning of the movie when they were doing Overwatch for some U.S. Marines that were in the area, and that the sniper team with Chris Kyle had to make a snap decision, and he had to make a shot. Those are some of the pressures that snipers would be under from day to day when performing Overwatch tasks as such.
How do you handle that?
Everybody handles it differently. I think with regards to the Canadian Sniper program, there's a very robust selection criteria to become a sniper in Canada. So prior to even volunteering to be a sniper, there are certain courses you have to have within the infantry, one of them being a reconnaissance course, which is going to square away all your field craft and make sure that you can indeed operate in the field under extreme stress, sleep-deprived, hungry, and everything else. From there, you'll do some time in a reconnaissance platoon. Then you'll actually volunteer for sniper training. So nobody can actually be forced to go on sniper training. You'll actually fill out a memorandum, submit it through your chain of command, and from there, that's step number one. From there, you'll do pre-training, and part of that pre-training is an interview and a test from your personnel selection officer to make sure that you are indeed mentally fit as well as physically fit. Something else you have to do as well is, even though you are a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, you do have to do a criminal background check. So there are a lot of checks and balances to make sure that by the time the individual even goes on the course, before they're even a qualified sniper, that they are indeed mentally and physically fit to be there.
Gotcha. Now, Dr. McKillop, Warrant Warren did tell us earlier in our discussion about some of the technological changes that have enabled these remarkably long kill shots to be successful. That's the equipment itself. What about the ballistics? What changes have happened over the last decade or two that would enable these incredibly long shots to be more successful?
Well, certainly the single most important thing is calculating power. An interesting historical fact is that the very first kind of deployable computer was a computer that was designed specifically for doing ballistic calculations. It was for Royal Navy battleships, but it was the same idea. You know, at long range, you have a lot of factors that affect whether or not you're going to get a hit. And they had this giant machine on board ship to try to bring these things into all these factors into the calculation to increase the probability of a hit. So the science of ballistics really has three kind of subfields. There's internal ballistics, that's what's happening inside the firearm. And then there's external ballistics, which is basically the flight of the projectile, everything that's going on as the projectile from the point where it leaves the barrel until it hits the target. And then terminal ballistics, which is what happens when it hits the target. I suppose the physics of it are really pretty straightforward. You know, the calculation is 1/2 mass times the velocity squared. That's the energy in the bullet when it hits the target. So you don't have to be a mathematician to know that velocity squared means that the speed of the bullet is very important for the amount of energy that it's able to deliver. Further it goes, the slower it's going, to the point where on some of these extremely long shots, the projectile has lost an awful lot of its velocity, so it doesn't have much energy anymore. And certainly in the larger caliber weapons, like the 50 caliber weapons, and even there's a 25 millimeter sniper rifle now, there's been great advances in the projectiles. So the projectiles themselves are not just chunks of lead wrapped in steel anymore. They're very sophisticated projectiles. And for the larger calibers, even high explosive rounds, incendiary rounds, fragmentation rounds, armor piercing rounds, that sort of thing. Do they tend to explode
on impact?
A high explosive round is designed to explode on impact, yeah. So the effect of that is that you can fire one of these bullets at extremely long range, and it doesn't matter the speed anymore because the energy on the target, the terminal ballistics, is going to be a function of the warhead.
Well, I have seen you somewhere say that the sniping weapon is one of the, quote, most humane weapons in modern warfare. How so?
Oh, I believe that's true. It is, if you're talking about a discriminating weapon, I don't think there's anything more discriminating than a sniper rifle. Most of the weapons that are used by armed forces and people inflicting violence are indiscriminate. Bombs, machine guns, flamethrowers, grenades, whatever you like, they tend to be have an area effect. You know, you look at any TV report of the aftermath of a car bomb, and you'll see that there's destruction everywhere.
Right.
And it might have been, the car bomb might have been placed there to kill one person, but it knocks down the street, breaks glass for 2 blocks, you know, wounds people with flying debris. Whereas these snipers are able to put a shot into a target and neutralize it.
And that's it, no collateral damage. Okay, Morgan Warren, I want to, let's play some tape here. I want to, here was Prime Minister Trudeau. The Prime Minister got into a bit of hot water as he described the kill shot that took place, the new record-breaking kill shot back in June, because that shot was taken in what is known as an advise and assist mission. Let's play this clip and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, roll it, please.
Defense of our coalition partners is something that is expected of Canada, and quite frankly, Canadians expect of themselves, even in an advise and assist capacity. And what happened there is, first of all, something to be celebrated for the excellence of the Canadian forces in their training and their performance of their duties, but also something to be understood as being entirely consistent with what Canada is expected and Canadians expect our forces to be doing.
Okay, Warren, can you help us understand why taking that kill shot would have been appropriate even in a non-combat, so-called advise and assist mission?
Well, first thing I'll say is that I am not completely aware of what the CANSOFCOM mandate is. I'm not a member of that unit. I've never been a member of that unit. But speaking from personal experience, one thing that I know is when you are deployed on operation, regardless whether it's peace support, peacekeeping, combat operations, every soldier on the ground is issued their rules of engagement. And you're well versed in your rules of engagement, and you know what you are allowed to do and what you are not allowed to do. So the soldiers on the ground, if they made that shot, it was because it was within the rules of engagement.
When you take these super long kill shots, do you hold your breath before pulling the trigger?
No, you're not really going to hold your breath. You're going to hold your breath. It's probably going to accelerate your heart rate. Heart rate goes up, and everything else is going to go out of whack. So you want to relax, take some deep breaths in and out before you release your shot. So just remain calm.
So is one of the toughest things to teach a potential sniper not to hold your breath when you take that shot? Because I think the instinct is to do so.
It might be instinct for you, but I don't think it's not instinct for everybody to hold their breath. It's actually the first time anybody's ever asked me a question like that. I've gotten a lot of questions with regards to shooting, and I've never heard of anybody kind of holding their breath when they're making a long-range shot like that. But no, I think the hardest thing to teach a young sniper is how to make a wind call. To figure out your firing solution, to make your shot go, in a straight line from point A to point B. The mathematics behind it is in theory is easy to teach, but trying to make that wind call with all the changes that happen in the wind from the shooter's position to the target position, it's definitely one of the harder things to do, regardless of technology. A lot of that is coming right out of the shooter's gut instinct, as well as just their level of experience.
Okay, I think I'm glad I asked you one question you haven't heard before. I think I am anyway. Can I thank Warrant Officer Morgan Warren from the Sniper Cell Instructor B Company Infantry School at the Combat Training Center at CFB Gagetown. He was on the line from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and Dr. James McKillop, the historian at the Directorate of History and Heritage at DND in Ottawa. Thanks so much, you two.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.